Hi there, I'm Vincent Boss and I provide dating and self-improvement advice. And in today's podcast, we're going to be discussing, has your ex moved on? 3 major signs. I provide audio coaching for breakup recovery, trying to get an ex back, attracting someone new, and life coaching. Visit www.dateme.tips for more details. Please check your spam and junk folders if you are expecting an email from me. Check out my socials for extra content. The links are in the description. So now let's get back into today's podcast. And today we are discussing, has your ex moved on? 3 major signs. So if you have been dumped and want to try to get your ex back, you will be fearful of your ex moving on. Now it's important to say that feelings evolve and change over time. So it's plausible that your ex could move on, but then a year or so down the line could catch feelings for you once more. And hence nothing is definitive. In today's podcast, I'll be discussing 3 major signs that your ex has moved on at this current time. So let's get straight into this, and point number 1, it's been more than a year. So if you're trying to get your ex back and you're wondering, is there a time frame of which I can't get them back beyond? Well, the short answer to that question is no. I've seen instances where people have got their ex back many years into the future. There doesn't seem to be a definitive moment of which you definitely can't get your ex back beyond. However, from my own research, it definitely shows that unfortunately once you've been broken up for more than a year, your odds on getting back together do lessen. Now, as I've just said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get your ex back, but it just shows that the odds on getting your ex back beyond a year do decrease. Now, the reason I believe this is the case is because if we consider all of the moments that your ex could be thinking about you, some of those major moments are attributed to triggers via dates on the calendar. So your birthday, maybe something like New Year's Eve, perhaps something like Christmas, and all of those special days on the calendar which meant something to you both, maybe your anniversary, for instance. Now, if you've been broken up for more than a year, what this means is that every single one of those days has been and has gone. And if your ex hasn't reached out to you and wanted to reconnect, and if there hasn't been a moment where you two have nearly got back together, or perhaps you did and then sadly you broke up again, if there's been nothing to show that your ex-dumper is intrigued by you when we consider every single one of those days has been and gone at least once, what we see is a decrease in your chance of getting your ex back beyond that point. Because even though those anniversaries, maybe the anniversary of you getting together, your birthday, New Year's Eve, like I just said, all of those and more, once they've been around once, but when they come around the second time, they hold a little less power. Now, it doesn't mean that it can't still trigger their thoughts. In particular, their own unique circumstances will hugely connect to whether or not what's going on in their own life and what's going on with the triggers, whether or not it pulls them in towards you. So there is a lot of things that we have to consider. Things that I don't know without speaking with you, you don't know necessarily even either, because we don't exactly know what is going on in your ex's world. So we have to generalize somewhat. And when we are trying to do that generalization and we ask ourselves the question, has your ex moved on? Well, if you haven't heard from them in a year, if you've been broken up a year, and maybe you have heard from them, but it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere, well, this is where we would have to say that by and large, we have to unfortunately look and say, right, at this moment in time, your ex-dumper has probably moved on. They've moved on. Now, as I said at the beginning of today's podcast, we can never say definitively that you can't get your ex back. And this isn't about giving you false hope. You certainly shouldn't be waiting around. You certainly shouldn't be thinking to yourself, right, I'm just going to wait around, I'm going to clock watch, and eventually my ex will come back. Because there is sadly no guaranteed way of getting your ex back. Nothing works 100% of the time. And there's certainly no guarantee that you will get your ex back in any specific instance. So you can't be waiting around. You need to be living your life to the full, focusing on yourself, improving yourself every single day, and making new connections. Because if you don't, you might find yourself trapped in a negative loop of where you were just doing the same thing over and over again, which is probably not a whole lot, just sitting in your room alone with your head in your hands, waiting for your ex, and that might never come, because tomorrow never comes. So this is why we have to have that balance. It's not about giving you false hope. I'm certainly not encouraging you to wait around. I'm encouraging you to live your life to the full and make new connections. And if your ex does decide to reach out to you, and there is a situation of where you can try and reconnect, then great. You can deal with that at that moment. You can deal with that at the time. It's not something you have to worry about right now, because sadly, that isn't on the table. If you're listening to today's podcast, I'm imagining that you've been broken up with, and right now it's not looking like your ex-dumper wants to reconnect. But have they moved on? Well, one of those major signs, but right now they've moved on as if it's been beyond a year. However, in the future, beyond that, we don't know. Their circumstances will change and evolve, so will yours. Triggers will still take place, and everything in between which can pull your ex towards you, so that if they do reach out to you and want to reconnect 18 months later, for instance, I wouldn't be hugely, astonishingly surprised. But what I would say is that you shouldn't be waiting that length of time to see if it happens, because unfortunately, there's no guarantee that it will. So now let's get into point number 2 and the second point of today's podcast. Please like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. And point number 2 is indifference. So in today's podcast, we're speaking about and asking the question, has your ex moved on? And as I said in point number 1, there could be instances where you and your ex have actually interacted post-breakup, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And this ties in somewhat with point number 2, and that is indifference. Now, indifference is very, very important to get your head around, because people will say to me, well, my ex hates me. That means they don't want to get back together. But you have to understand that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is actually indifference. If you are feeling what you would determine as hate from your ex, there is a chance that it's just emotions which are boiling over, and there is still a deep connection within you and between you both. Now, please don't get that wrong, and don't try and use that as something to hang your hat on and say, right, my ex is saying all these hateful things, so actually deep down they secretly love me, so I'm going to start or continue to pursue them. No, okay? Remember, you need to be living your life in the right way. That means, firstly, never contacting your ex again unless they contact you first. That's the by and large general rule. Secondly, respect what your ex is saying. If they are saying things such as leave me alone, you absolutely should be. If they're saying negative things about you, that's not very nice to hear, but we have to acknowledge what they are saying. I'm not trying to get you to listen to what they're saying and think the opposite, right? If they're saying negative things, it's coming from a place of where they feel that negativity right now. However, if they do have all of that emotion bubbling inside, there is probably a greater chance that deep inside somewhere, there is still that emotion which could be turned somewhat into loving you again. So you just need to use your common sense with it. The point being is that hate is not the opposite of love. So if you're feeling that hate off your ex, that is actually not worse in some regards to if you are feeling indifference. And indifference could be just the feeling that your ex-dumper isn't actually that bothered. They don't mind if they bump into you in the street. They don't mind if they have a conversation with you. They just don't really care. And they're not going to be negative about it. They're not going to be overly emotional or dramatic about it. They're not going to be stressful about it. But they're just not bothered. You might bump into them, you have a conversation, and you leave that chat and you think, well, that was pleasant. They didn't say any cruel words to me. But when you consider what happens beyond that, is it going in the direction that you hope? And if they're showing indifference, if they're just not really bothered, if there is a scenario where you think, okay, this isn't that bad, but then again, it's not really going anywhere, that is probably a sign that right now, your ex has moved on. Now again, it doesn't mean that their emotions and feelings can't evolve and be triggered and things change in their own life and within your life and how you present yourself and everything else in between. It doesn't mean that in the future that can't possibly turn around. Remember, we're not trying to give false hope. You shouldn't be waiting around for that possibility, but it's certainly a plausible possibility. So try not to be thinking to yourself, well, this means forevermore I can never get my ex back, But we have to acknowledge that right now, they are not really interested. They have moved on. They are in a different part of their life cycle. They're in a different zone. They are moving in a different direction. Does it mean they are with somebody else in a new relationship? It's possible, but not necessarily the case. They might be single, but just feel that they don't want to connect with you because the relationship as they saw it isn't something that was taking them to a direction and a place that they actually wanted to be. This could be due to them feeling that you were being complacent. This could be just them feeling that you were on one page and they're on the other. It doesn't really matter exactly how they come to this point, but if they are feeling that the relationship wasn't working for them, then sadly, this is why they've probably moved on in their own way. But just to reiterate the point, sometimes people think, well, they can only move on if they're really angry with me or if they're saying bad things about me. No, that is the thing we need to really recognize here. Sometimes it's indifference, which can be very calm, very relaxed. They're not running away if they bump into you. They're having a conversation. But unfortunately, they're just, at this moment in time at least, they're just not really that bothered. Now, if you would like advice and support about how to try and increase the chance of one day getting your ex back, then you may want to consider my audio coaching service, where me and you can speak one-on-one about your unique specific situation. Go to my website www.dateme.tips for more information about how I can become your coach and your teammate via my audio coaching service. Talking about your feelings can also improve your mental health. It helps prevent the buildup of negative emotions, which can lead to stress, anxiety, depression, and even physical health issues. Speak your heart to free your mind. So now let's get into point number 3 and the final point of today's podcast. If you feel that this podcast has helped you, then please consider buying me a coffee. The link to do so is in the description. And point number 3 is they've returned your belongings. So at the time of a breakup, there is a strong possibility that you will have some of your ex's belongings and they will have some of yours. You will have some of their items, they will have some of theirs at their house, whatever it may be. And there comes that point where you're thinking, right, I want my things back. Or your ex will be thinking, well, I want my things back. And how do you go about this? Well, this is a situation where you do have to read between the lines. Okay, there isn't a scenario that we can look at and say, right, definitely, that means your ex has moved on regarding the belongings, the possessions, etc. But you can read between the lines in the way things are being said, in the way things are being done. And generally speaking, if your ex-dumper is very quick to try and sort out the possessions, then that is unfortunately a sign that they right now have moved on. The reason for this is because they don't want to leave anything for the future. They don't want to leave something for you to reach out to them or them to reach out to you to try and interact once more. So if they're trying to sort all of this out very, very quickly, if you, for instance, broke up last week and already everything has been arranged, they've already said, right, I want to collect my things, then you can get your things, and that would be that. If they are trying to arrange things really, really quickly, then this shows that they want to draw a line under your relationship and they want to move forward on a different path, and again showing that right now in this moment they have sadly moved on. But what if they've done the opposite to this? What if instead they have left a few things at your house that you know they kind of need? Or maybe you know that they know that they've got things of yours at their house and they haven't volunteered for you to come and collect them. Now, I'm not trying to say that you read too much into this. I don't want you dropping into conspiracy theories and trying to figure out exactly what it means, with the code and the analysis, because at the end of the day, there could be innocent explanations. But what I would say is that I've spoke to dumpers who have actually told me that they've deliberately not set everything straight just in case they change their mind in the future. So I can't say that is the case for you and your ex, but what I can say is I've spoke to dumpers, more than one, who have told me that they deliberately didn't want to sort everything out just in case they changed their mind further down the line. They knew that you had that possession of theirs. They knew that they had something of yours, but they decided not to volunteer to sort it out because they was in no rush to do so. Now, what do you do if you're a dumpee? How do you play it? Well, I would suggest that if you know that they have something of yours, you need to consider it within one of two categories. Is it something you definitely, really, truly, genuinely need? Or is it something you might kind of like, but you're not really too bothered? Now, if it's the latter, I would suggest you do nothing. Let them have that possession of yours, because it gives you a special card, as I like to call it, that you can play further down the line. Now, if instead you definitely need the items, then unfortunately you can't really play this card. You're going to just have to ask ASAP that you need your item back. Remember, my version of a no contact rule does have those caveats to it. One of those is necessary contact. If you need an item that your ex has of yours, you're going to have to reach out. And if you need it ASAP, you will be doing it ASAP, and you will be sorting this out. That is necessary. Now, if you do that, keep things on point. Don't try and flirt with your ex or anything. Just say, hey, I really need to pick up my work laptop. So can we just sort this out? And just be pleasant, be as polite and respectful as you can. Even if you're thinking, they've dumped me and now they're keeping my stuff, try to stay cool, calm and collected. Because if you don't, it's not going to help you. If you argue, if you get into a negative mindset, it won't help you. Just be pleasant, just keep things on point. Ask for your work laptop, whatever it may be, and see if it can be sorted out. Now, of course, if and when you meet your ex, make sure you look your best, be your best, at your best. But the interaction might be very brief, but still you can do that. However, if your ex-dumper has an item that you don't really need it, but you know and you remember they've got it, I wouldn't do anything. And the reason I wouldn't do anything is because firstly, you want to see if they volunteer to give you that item back further down the line. Or secondly, it is a card you can play. Now, this isn't something that I would suggest very often, but it is a scenario where, as a dumpee, you could reach out to your ex-dumper further down the line as a little bit of a hit and hope, you could say, using the item as a reason. Now, you've got to use your common sense. If they have a pair of your socks, then you can't really text them 9 months down the line, ask for your socks back, and not for them to be suspicious about your intentions. Okay, if it's something which isn't really that important at all, then maybe you can get away with not saying anything for a few weeks, but then you're going to have to play that card. If they haven't volunteered your items back, and if you think, well, I just want another interaction, I want to see, how things are, you can play that card and you can say, hey, can I just get my items, my socks are at your house? Okay, that can only wait a few weeks. But if it's a bit of middle ground, it's not a work laptop, but it's also not a pair of socks. It's something kind of in between regarding importance, significance, whether it's worth a lot financially, whether it's sentimental. Maybe you could wait a few months. Now, I don't really suggest in many instances that you contact your ex unless they contact you first. And therefore, you would have to be very careful and delicate in how you wanted to play this. This is where, for instance, me and you could speak via my audio coaching service to create a strategy and a plan. But there is possible scope for you to reach out to your ex-dumper months down the line to ask for something that they have of yours. And it's just something to bear in mind. And that's why the returning of belongings is an interesting one. Because if they try to sort it out ASAP, unfortunately, that's probably a sign that right now they've moved on. But if they don't, there might be a possibility that they want an interaction later down the line. They want it on their terms. And if you have their possessions, I certainly wouldn't be volunteering or offering anything. I'd be waiting for them. I wouldn't text them and say, hey, can you get your things? I would leave it forevermore. I would never contact them again unless they contacted me first about those possessions of theirs. That's for them to reach out to you. And you can see exactly how things are at the time that they do.